I always thought big revelations would come with screaming headlines or explosive fights. But in my life, it began with something trivial. A tiny piece of foil on the bathroom rug. That glimmer caught my eye the moment I walked in. I'd left the lights off, only a thin shaft of morning sun spilled across the floor. I remember pausing, worried I might step on something sharp. Vanessa, my wife, hadn't said anything about dropping anything, but it wouldn't be the first time a small object ended up in the wrong place. When I knelt down, I realized the spark came from a round foil circle, about the size of my pinky's tip. It looked familiar, the kind of backing left behind when you push out a pill. One side was blank, but the other read 2. That detail made me pause. Today was Wednesday, which meant that foil should have covered Tuesday's pill. I wasn't on any prescriptions. At 35, I was healthy and took nothing beyond the occasional aspirin. Vanessa, as far as I knew, wasn't on any medication either. We'd both had recent checkups and had been told, "You're in great shape." So why would a little foil circle labeled 2 be on our bathroom floor? I tried to dismiss it as a stray piece of packaging. Maybe we'd dropped something without realizing. Yet a small knot of worry tightened in my gut. The only daily pills we used to have in the house were Vanessa's birth control pills. That was a few years back, before I had a vasectomy. The procedure came up once we decided not to have more children. She had been on the pill for years, but we eventually switched to the permanent route of my vasectomy. Afterwards, she supposedly stopped taking birth control altogether. But now I held Tuesday's foil from a daily pill pack. A chill spread through me. If she was still on the pill, then it could only mean she was worried about getting pregnant. If she was worried about pregnancy, that meant the vasectomy I had wasn't enough, or she was sleeping with someone else. In the past, I might have just asked her directly, but some instinct told me to investigate before confronting her. I've always been methodical, especially after all the nights I spent perfecting engineering designs at my firm. I needed more proof before deciding whether I was overreacting or truly had reason to be suspicious. I cleaned up, put the foil back where I found it, and made sure I left the bathroom looking exactly as it did before. Then I drove to work, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. At the office, instead of diving into the new contracts, I started looking up private DNA kits and covert surveillance equipment. My thoughts had turned dark within the span of an hour, but I knew I needed clarity. If Vanessa was indeed cheating, I wanted to know with who, for how long, and if our children, James and Sonia, were even mine. We had 2 children, 5-year-old James and 3-year-old Sonia. I thought they were both mine. I'd always believed they were my flesh and blood. Still, that doubt nagged me. If she'd been lying about the pills, could she have lied about everything else? I ordered a series of items: discrete voice recorders, tiny cameras that could be placed around the house, phone cloning software, and DNA test kits. I felt sick doing it, but I convinced myself it was necessary. I wanted unassailable facts before I took any steps that might blow up our family. Those few days waiting for delivery seemed endless. In that time, I kept a close eye on Vanessa, searching for suspicious behavior. She seemed normal. No big changes to her routine, no sudden nights away. Our intimate life was the same as ever, once or twice a week, often squeezed in before the kids woke up. She didn't rush to shower off any unfamiliar smells, nor did she wear different perfume or clothing. If she was cheating, she was doing a damn good job of covering her tracks. When Friday arrived, I got the call at work that my packages had been delivered. I had them sent to the office so Vanessa wouldn't ask awkward questions. That afternoon, I pretended I had a light schedule and went home early. The au pair, who helped us with the kids while Vanessa and I both worked, was feeding the children. With her busy, I went upstairs and installed cameras in the bathroom, living room, and bedroom, the main spaces where I suspected evidence might appear. The bathroom was crucial for seeing if Vanessa really was taking birth control pills. As soon as the kids were in bed, I used a cheek swab on each of them for the DNA kits, doing my best not to let them see what I was doing or understand the significance. They just thought Daddy was checking their cheeks with a funny Q-tip. I swabbed myself as well. Then I mailed the samples, which would be processed quickly. Results promised within about 48 hours from the time the lab received them. That evening, Vanessa came home at the usual time. We chatted about mundane things, her job, the kids, what to watch on TV. Meanwhile, I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. After she went to shower, I slipped into her car to place a voice recorder under the seat. I also cloned her phone, downloading her text messages and emails. To my surprise, there was nothing incriminating in her digital footprint. No evidence of flirting, no suspicious phone calls. That either meant I was wrong or she was more careful than I'd imagined. The weekend was almost normal. We did what we always did. Chores, a trip to the park with the kids, and morning intimacy that felt more like a routine chore than a loving act. I kept a polite demeanor, but inside I was restless. By Monday morning, Vanessa headed to work as usual, and I told her I'd be working from home to catch up on some projects. The moment she left, I removed the micro SD cards from the cameras and loaded the footage onto my computer. The bathroom footage showed Vanessa taking a small white pill around the same time each day. Confirmed. She was definitely back on the pill. My heart sank, but I pushed myself to keep checking. The bedroom camera presented the next surprise. On Saturday night, while I was busy cooking dinner, she had come out of the shower, gone to the bedroom, and typed a message on a phone I didn't recognize. She apparently had a second phone that wasn't the one I had cloned. I watched as she finished typing, walked to the air conditioning vent, opened it carefully, and stashed the phone inside. I was stunned. She had a secret phone. No wonder I'd found nothing on her official phone. It also made sense that she'd keep it out of sight whenever I was around. I needed to see what was on that second phone. That night, after she went to bed, I checked the vent from the other side, which opened into Sonia's room. The phone wasn't there. It must have been in her purse or somewhere else. So I bided my time. Eventually, on another occasion, when Vanessa was showering and I heard the water running, I quietly opened the vent from Sonia's side. The phone was there. I grabbed it, raced to my office, cloned its contents to a new device in a matter of minutes, and put it back. My hands shook the entire time, adrenaline surging. As I finished, I heard the water shut off. I had just enough time to slip into Sonia's room and pretend I was watching her sleep. Vanessa peeked in, curious, but I played it off as fatherly affection. The next morning at my office, I finally accessed the phone's cloned data. Within seconds, my vision blurred with tears. It was exactly what I'd feared. The text messages were explicit, describing stolen afternoons in hotels and intimate acts between Vanessa and another man. She joked about how I didn't suspect a thing. They even mentioned scheduling around my travel. The man was never named in the texts, which only made me more certain it was someone she worked with closely and didn't want a name in writing. I sat there crying, ignoring the ping of my secretary, Michelle, on the intercom. She eventually knocked and opened my door, finding me hunched over my desk, tears streaming. Michelle was a sharp, no-nonsense woman a few years older than me. Usually, we kept a professional distance, but this time she came in, locked the door, and handed me tissues. "What happened?" she asked calmly. I told her everything. The suspicious foil, the hidden pills, the cameras, the second phone. I felt pathetic, but she just listened. Then she said, "Gary, we need details, and we need a plan." When I mentioned I'd also done DNA swabs on the kids, she nodded. "Good. Find out the truth. Then decide how to act. For now, you have a ticket to visit the Portland branch. You'll be leaving today and won't be back until Thursday." I blinked at her, confused. We hadn't discussed any trip. "Trust me," she said. "Vanessa might get suspicious if you're around too much. Tell her you have a sudden crisis there." Michelle texted Vanessa from my phone, something about an emergency at the Portland location. Vanessa replied that she was sorry to hear it and hoped I'd be back soon. Michelle also gave me the name of her close friend, Lorraine, a divorce attorney who had handled Michelle's own turbulent divorce years ago. I found myself in Lorraine's office within hours, still in shock. Lorraine listened, asked pointed questions, and explained my legal options. Do nothing, file for an amicable divorce, or go nuclear with an adultery filing that would blow up Vanessa's world and cut off her claims to my assets. I considered each carefully. Do nothing? Impossible. I was furious. File amicably? Why should I give up half of everything I'd built, especially if the kids weren't mine? My final choice was obvious. "I want the nuclear option," I said, hearing my own voice tremble with anger. Lorraine nodded. "All right, we'll gather more evidence first. For that, I need the phone you cloned so we can build a solid case." I gave it to her without hesitation. Michelle then took me to a modest hotel, telling me to shower, order room service, and not to go near the minibar. "I need you alert," she insisted. "You have to plan your next steps." But I couldn't think clearly. My life as I knew it had just shattered. The only small sliver of hope was the possibility that the kids were still mine, or that I was jumping to the wrong conclusions. Yet deep down, I knew the odds were slim. The next morning, I got a text from the DNA company that my results would be ready by the afternoon. I couldn't bring myself to look. Michelle, sensing my hesitation, took my phone, loaded the test results page, and frowned. They're not up yet, she said gently, returning the phone. We'll check again in a few hours. Meanwhile, I had to secure my financial future. Michelle reminded me that there were over 100 employees depending on my leadership in our engineering firm. If Vanessa took me to the cleaners, the business might collapse, and all those families would suffer. That stiffened my spine. I forced myself to think like the engineer I am, strategizing each step. We visited my longtime business attorney, Brian Spencer. He reminded me that we had a prenuptial agreement in place. Every partner in our firm was required to sign one before marriage to protect the company from potential marital disputes. That prenup shielded the company from spousal claims, meaning Vanessa could only target my personal salary and assets, like the house and 401k. Here's my advice, Brian said. Buy out your partner, Robert, who's been hinting he wants to sell. Put as much of your liquid assets as possible into the company, even if it means taking a loan. That keeps your money behind a firewall she can't breach. It sounded daunting, but it beat letting her walk away with half. I called Robert. Initially, he just asked, "Why?" And I told him the truth in one flat sentence. Vanessa's been cheating, possibly since day one. He said he was sorry and agreed to sell most of his shares, keeping only 5% for himself as a consulting engineer. We drew up the papers. At lunch, Michelle and I checked the DNA results again. This time, they were posted. She read them first, a sorrowful expression on her face. "I'm sorry, Gary." My hands shook as I took the phone. Both kids were fathered by the same man, but that man wasn't me. My little boy and girl, the ones whose first steps and first words I'd cherished, were not mine at all. I felt rage hotter than anything I'd ever experienced. Michelle's voice cut through my haze. "Stay focused or you'll lose everything." She guided me out of the diner and back to Lorraine's office. When we arrived, Lorraine had her own update. "We have a preliminary private investigator report. Vanessa had a man over at your house last night. We couldn't see inside, but we have footage of him entering. He used his own key." My stomach churned. Later, reviewing the living room camera, I saw him walk in, welcomed by our son. No, by her son, shouting, "Daddy Bill!" My tears came in unstoppable waves. That told me everything I needed to know about the father's identity. Bill Wainwright, Vanessa's longtime boss. I realized this might have been going on for the entire duration of our marriage, or close to it. Lorraine took the footage and cross-checked Bill's name. He was a high-level executive at Vanessa's firm, subject to a strict non-fraternization policy. "We can go after her company for that," Lorraine said, "and after him for alienation of affection, plus your wife for any false birth certificate claims." She listed a litany of possible legal strategies, all of them aggressive and devastating. She was thoroughly committed to the nuclear route I'd chosen. I returned to the hotel, numb. Michelle showed up at my door that evening saying, "You shouldn't be alone. Pack up, you're coming to my place." I was too exhausted to argue. Michelle had a single-story house, bigger than I'd expected, and she gave me a private room. There was no physical closeness or romantic vibe. It was more like I was a shattered man, and she was stepping in as a friend, one who didn't trust me to keep it together by myself. The next big step involved finalizing the buyout from Robert. We had to funnel my money into the company, effectively making me appear almost penniless once everything was said and done. I moved all personal funds, cashed out my 401k, taking the penalty, and prepared to refinance the house. Ultimately, I would appear to have a fraction of my real worth. It was legal, thanks to the prenuptial agreement and the timing of these transactions before the divorce. Brian drew up all the papers, Robert signed. I became the majority shareholder. Now, everything was in the company's name, safe from Vanessa's reach. Monday morning, Lorraine filed for divorce on grounds of adultery, fraud, and emotional distress. At the same time, she filed a lawsuit against Bill's employer for failing to enforce its own policies. She also had process servers standing by to deliver everything in person. One set to Bill at his office, one set to the company's HR department, and one set to Vanessa's desk. I watched the clock. At exactly 10 a.m., my phone pinged with an email. The divorce papers had been served. The other suits were served minutes later. Within 10 minutes, my phone lit up. I expected it to be Vanessa, but it was my mother. "Gary," she said. "Hi, Mom. What is this?" Her voice was sharp. "I got your letter. Your father did too. Are you really doing this?" "Did you read it?" I asked. "I read it and I don't believe it," she said. "This is Vanessa, your wife, the mother of your children. How can you just—" "They're not my children," I interrupted. There was a brief pause. Then she said, "They're yours in every way that matters." "No, they're not," I said. You raised them. You've been their father since the day they were born. Are you saying that doesn't count for anything? I'm saying it was built on a lie. Her breath came hard through the phone. So what? You're just walking away? Like they meant nothing to you? You're punishing them for something Vanessa did. You don't think they're going to suffer because of this? Because you suddenly decided you don't want to be their father anymore? What the hell are you saying? I shouted. I don't want to lose my grandchildren over this. I won't, she said. Then don't, I said. That's your choice. I have to go. Gary, I ended the call. Immediately, my phone rang again. It was Vanessa. Gary, we need to talk, she said. Her voice shook. I'm coming home. I said nothing and hung up. Then I realized that home was still my house, where we'd lived together, but I guess she still saw it as hers too. Michelle gave me a quick hug and stepped out, leaving me to face Vanessa alone. I waited in my office at home, reading email after email from relatives who had gotten the disclosure packet. My father was outraged, my sister furious. Vanessa arrived about 20 minutes later, stormed into the office, and shut the door. She'd never looked so disheveled. Gary, she started. I'm not interested, I cut her off. But, not interested, I repeated. Don't you even want? No, I said. I don't want to hear anything from you. You've lied to me for 9 years. Neither of the kids are mine. Yet you convinced me to get a vasectomy while you were still on the pill, just so you could continue your affair with Daddy Bill. Her eyes widened in shock. So, no, Vanessa, I continued. I don't care what you have to say. My lawyer's contact information is in the packet you received when you were served. If you have anything important to discuss, you can talk to her. What about the children? She asked. What children? I responded. I don't have any children, and if it were up to you, I'd never have any. I would ask why you did this to me, but I really don't want to hear another lie. I have no interest in your excuses or justifications. I just want this whole mess to be over so I can pick up the pieces of my life and move on. I called the au pair into the room. I knew she could hear me since my office door was open and she was just in the next room. You're fired, I said, effective immediately. Pack your things and get out. What? She asked. Why? Because you were covering for her, I said, pointing at Vanessa. You knew she was sleeping with her boss. I don't know if you knew the kids were his instead of mine, but you definitely knew what was happening. I have video proof of you talking to Bill about the kids. Get out. Gary? Vanessa interjected. You can't fire her. I'm the one who pays her wages. The au pair shot Vanessa a grateful look. Well, I said, I've already informed the agency that you were involved in an affair and that I won't be taking legal action if they remove you from their roster. So if Vanessa wants to keep you on personally, not only will she have to pay you, but she'll also need to handle all your tax, vacation, pension, sick leave, and insurance. The au pair's face went pale. Not only was she losing her job, but being kicked off the agency's books made it nearly impossible for her to find another position. Agencies shared information. Now get out, I ordered, and she hurriedly left. Did you have to do that? Vanessa said. She didn't deserve. You're talking again, I cut her off. I told you I don't want to hear it. What I do want is for you to pack your stuff, take your kids, and get the hell out of my house. This is my house too, she protested. Not according to the paperwork, I said. It's in my name only. Until the courts say otherwise, get the hell out. She flinched at my shout. James walked in. Mommy, he said. Sonia fell down. Vanessa, looking shocked and tearful, stood up and went to tend to her daughter. I shut my office door and stayed inside while she gathered her things. A few minutes later, she returned with Sonia in her arms. Are you going to say goodbye to... Don't even say it, I cut her off. She's not my daughter and he's not my son. Take them to Daddy Bill and let him take care of his own kids. They have nothing to do with me. Gary, Get out! As soon as she was gone, I completely broke down. A moment later, Michelle slipped into the house, having waited nearby in case I lost it. She held me as I wept, her presence oddly calming. We heard the car drive off. My phone buzzed continuously, but I ignored it. For the first time in a week, I had a desperate urge to just vanish from my own life. Michelle, ever firm, reminded me we still had steps to finalize, setting the wheels in motion with the HR lawsuit, locking down the company finances, and so on. A few hours later, I got an email that Vanessa had taken out a restraining order against me, claiming emotional harm. The order barred me from my own house until a court hearing. It was a malicious move, no doubt orchestrated by her lawyer to show the judge she was in danger, but Lorraine was already on it, pointing out that I was the one who'd installed the cameras, gathered evidence, and discovered the fraud. The judge soon overturned it. Vanessa moved in with her parents. Meanwhile, Bill lost his job when the company realized he'd flagrantly violated their non-fraternization policy with a subordinate and fathered 2 kids with her. Lawsuits flew in all directions. In the end, Bill's employer settled with me for a substantial sum. Bill personally had to settle for alienation of affection in our state, paying me a chunk of money that would help me repay the pension fund loan. I was numb to most of it. My real heartbreak was losing James and Sonia, who I still loved but refused to see because I couldn't handle the pain. Maybe that made me a coward, but every time I thought about those kids, I saw Bill's face. They would likely forget me soon enough anyway. Vanessa used them as emotional leverage, begging me to remain in their lives, but I wasn't ready. Weeks turned into a month. I sold the house, took a loss, and moved on. I had no appetite for living in the place that had become a stage for betrayal. I stayed in Michelle's spare room temporarily. We were polite to each other, but there was a new tension in the air. She was always professional at the office, but outside work, she seemed to be constantly checking on me. The day the divorce was finalized, I was at my desk. I received the official envelope, opened it, and found the final decree. I was free of Vanessa, legally severed from the marriage. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. My phone rang. I picked it up. Michelle said, "Bill Wainwright is dead. His wife found him with Vanessa again and shot him." I stared at the phone, shocked. I realized with a grim sense of irony that Bill would never get to raise the 2 children he had fathered behind my back. I wasn't sure if that was justice or more tragedy, but I won't lie. I felt no pity. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, I muttered under my breath. I half expected Michelle to reprimand me, but she just nodded. She walked into my office a minute later with an envelope in hand. "This arrived for you too. Looks like the final settlement from Bill's share." I saw the check, an amount that would help me fully cover my loan. I'd become truly free of any lingering debt. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair, unsure how to feel. My marriage was over, my illusions about fatherhood destroyed, the man who fathered those kids dead, and I was now financially secure in a twisted turn of fate. Michelle closed my office door, stepped forward, and kissed me, firmly, passionately, without hesitation. When she drew back, I realized my heart was pounding for a new reason altogether. She smiled at my stunned reaction. "For 9 years, I've taken care of you," she said softly. "You're the most decent man I've ever known, and you never once crossed a line with me, even when you were at your lowest. I've waited for you a long time, Gary. If you'll let me, I want to show you not every woman lies, and not every relationship ends in heartbreak." I replayed all our interactions over the years. The quiet professionalism, her protectiveness, her unwavering willingness to fight for me once the truth came out. Perhaps I'd been blind, too busy with my marriage to see someone who genuinely cared. I also remembered Dr. Harrington telling me vasectomy reversals had a high success rate, and I felt a pang of hope. Fatherhood wasn't off the table for me forever. I smiled at Michelle, still trembling from her kiss. I asked a simple question, and it came out with a raw edge that almost made me laugh. "How many kids do you think we should have?" She grinned widely. "At least 2, she said, her eyes warm. "But let's just see where this goes." In that moment, I realized my life had been flipped upside down, yet somehow a new chapter was opening. My future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped. I'd gotten my closure, legal, emotional, and personal. A part of me would always ache for the children I once believed to be mine, yet I also understood that I had the chance to rebuild. Maybe I'd do it with someone who'd proven herself loyal and steady right by my side the whole time. I nodded, and Michelle kissed me again. That's where my old life ended and a new one began, no longer weighed down by illusions and deceit. Maybe the heartbreak was the price of freedom, and maybe that was a fair trade after all.